is talking about how to negotiate a higher salary. Now, if you missed Tuesday's live, no worries. We will continue to share. I'll share some of those tidbits today. But this is for you if you are finding yourself, especially as a woman in leadership, and you're wanting to negotiate your salary. You might be feeling like, "Ooh, I want to have something a little bit different in terms of how my compensation looks like." But most of all, you're realizing that while you're taking on more responsibilities, you might be getting more of those stretch assignments. You still aren't the one that's getting compensated through your salary or even through a promotion. So today I'm going to concentrate specifically on how you can negotiate a higher salary. And please remember, this is all about, it's live, it's interactive. So if you just let me know also if you can hear me, because that's also really important about today. And hold on. Okay, yeah, good. So it should be all functioning here right now. So let's just kind of dive into this. And one of those things that I've been hearing the last couple of weeks from a number of different clients of mine has been around this part of, you know what, I don't really need more money. So I don't really need to negotiate my salary, even though most of these women that I work with have already taken on a new role and become a role that has more responsibility. For example, I have one client that moved from a director to an executive role, but was then told, you're going to have to wait a year before we even talk about your salary. So there are really important factors here to take into account. But one of the things I really want to share with you today is at least some of the reasons that you tell yourself and that you share for yourself as to why you avoid salary negotiations. One of them, what I've seen, is I don't really need any more money. I'm earning well enough as it is. Money isn't a main driver for you. Another one might just be, well, if I ask for more money, maybe I'm being really greedy. I've also worked with clients that have had a really bad experience in the past, where when they had asked for additional salary or they were negotiating their salary, it really backfired, or at least they perceived it to be backfired on them. So there can be, of course, a number of reasons. So I want to share the perspective of Sheryl Sandberg, for example. So Sheryl Sandberg, when she was offered a position as a COO at Facebook, of course, she was also given an initial salary proposal. And at first she was going to decide to take it until she just had spoken with different mentors. And they recommended that she needed to negotiate because she needed to understand, first of all, what was more of a market rate, not for her, but a market rate for the type of position she was taking on, but also that the salary and compensation package reflects both her value as well as her experience and all of her skills that she brings to the role. Now, when you look at Sheryl Sandberg, she successfully negotiated a higher salary. And here's a different shift of perspective if you're also really struggling with, oh, I don't know if I want to ask for more salary. The other aspect of this is that as women, when we don't ask for more salary or we don't negotiate our salaries, we're constantly setting ourselves up to continue living in the gender pay gap that exists. And also setting it up that organizations can see it as women aren't necessarily needing as much compensation as men because they're not asking for it. And I've been on the other side where I've been seen women who have gotten hired into new roles, and they don't ask, they don't negotiate, where their male counterpart being hired into the same team with the same experience, with the same skills, does negotiate their salary and walks away with a higher salary. Now, if that already starts at the beginning of your career, that pay gap is going to keep increasing. So here's a couple of really quick ways of what you need to do, because I've gone through the steps on Tuesday's training, but I just wanted to share it again so that you have what you can do as you're looking at, especially this time of year, negotiating a higher salary. So the first one you need to do is really to understand your own value. So assess and acknowledge your own unique set of skills, experiences, and contributions to the organization. Number two, do your market research. Just because a company is making you a first offer, or even your organization has a certain pay scale bandwidth that's in, doesn't mean that precludes you from doing your market research. So understand very clearly what are the industry salary standards for the type of role that you're going to be doing, as well as the experience level that you bring. Now, the third one is about determining what you're going to ask for. Now, there's two ways of doing this. If you are negotiating a salary while you're already in your current role or within your current company, now I would suggest pick a number. Now, don't pick a random number, but that number is going to be based off of your market research. State a number and even make it uncomfortable for yourself and add a little bit extra so that you've got some negotiation room to come down a little bit, but state a number, because that gives your organization, your company, something to work towards. If you are negotiating in terms of a new role with a new organization, then you could also consider giving a bandwidth. Now, within this bandwidth, and don't make it very large, like you want to keep it fairly a small bandwidth of, okay, you know what, maybe I'm looking for a role. I expect the compensation according to also market research, also with my experience and with my skill set that I bring and the value that I'm going to contribute, that this role should pay me in between 120 and 130,000 a year. So where can we come out with that? Now, number four, you want to really frame the ask. So make it a persuasive argument based off of the value that you're bringing into the organization, as well as the industry standards. This has nothing to do with whether you want more money or not. It has nothing to do whether the other person thinks you want more money or not. This has everything to do with how much value do you bring to the organization, as well as what are the industry standards that are existing in your area. And lastly, time it right. So choose the right time to have this negotiation. Of course, the best time to have it is before you start in a new role in a new organization. That's when you have the most leverage. However, you can also still do it in a current role and do this when you are at the performance review stages. So now I've kind of reviewed it really, really quickly. If you want to go more in depth, I shared a lot more last on Tuesday. And I want to open it up for questions. So if you've got any questions, please just either raise your hand. Okay. And if you're on LinkedIn, because we're doing a lot on audio LinkedIn, raise your hand. If you've got questions and you're on Facebook or on your Instagram, just drop them in the comments and I can answer those as well. So anyone have any questions? Because I just keep talking. And I'm really passionate about this subject because I think as women, we really need to step it up and take responsibility for our own financial well-being, but also really letting go of this idea that asking for money when we don't need it is just a reason or excuse to kind of avoid really leaning into and owning the value and the contribution that we make to our companies and our organizations. So I see there's a couple of you listening, so I'm going to grab a quick sip of tea here, but is there anyone that has a question? Not all at once, of course, but I think you should be able to raise your hand and you can pop on and ask your question. All right, Jacqueline, let's see. Allow to speak. All right, Jacqueline, what's your question? I did approve that, didn't I? Ah, yes, now I can hear you. Yep. Oh, yeah. Well, and my recommendation would be is you continuously pivot to how you do fit into the role, because I've been on that side of the table as well, right? Hiring different team members, and sometimes what companies do is they look for the unicorn, and it doesn't exist. And so if you want to continue highlighting, like, okay, well, I see you're missing this experience. What you can also do is use it as a way to pivot into sharing how another experience would help you transfer the skills in terms of meeting that other criteria. Is that helpful, Jacqueline? Well, the first thing you have to do, if I'm hearing you correctly, is really decide that you are the right fit for the position. And then you have to build that business case and argue that business case as to why you are. Now, with every business decision, whether or not you're, because I know, Jacqueline, you're more in product development. Any product you're going to create also has its ups and downsides. It's not. It's to date haven't really found the product is perfectly 100% perfect, right? But even with that, you look at and make the business case of, well, this is why this is a really good this is a good product to go forwards with. Now, when you're in an interview, you're in a sense the product. You need to sell yourself. So the first decision that needs to be made is on your end of, like, I have enough value, or I have more than enough value to contribute to the role that I'm now having an interview for. And there's always that question, I always hate that question of, like, "Okay, well, what are your weaknesses?" Well, why are we talking about my weaknesses, right? It's how they're checking how you're going to answer that question. When you answer that question, you pivot into making it a valuable strength, rather than of, "Oh, because I've done this, and I know a lot of clients have done this, and women as general, we've been conditioned over years to be more modest, to be a team player, right? You don't want to be braggadocious in a sense. So you start going, well, you know what? I have a tendency to work too much, or maybe I don't delegate enough, right? So you're already starting to increase the argument against why they should hire you, rather than really looking at it from, okay, you know what? I've had to learn. I found that I had X and X skill. So maybe it's like, what, one of the things that I've learned, I struggled in the beginning was really delegating towards a team. And now I've really developed some very strong skills that have allowed me to build strong, high performing teams. And then you could even give almost a specific example and a specific result. So you haven't really allowed it to go into the negative of it, but you're really going forward into what is the positive here. But that's more of an interview question type of result. But any questions on how to negotiate a higher salary? Jacqueline. Okay. No, that's all right. So that's if because today was really all about Q&A. So if you've got any more questions, and please let me know. If you're watching this in a on either, just checking the chats here. You can always send me a message, a DM, and let me know. If you've got any more questions, just slide into the DMs. One thing that I will say as well is, if you are struggling with finding your negotiating your salary, or you want to look at, like, how can you raise your salary either within your current role or as you're negotiating into a next level position, then I encourage you to DM me salary, and we can take a look and see if you're someone that I can help as well, because I've helped over in the last 3 years over 60 plus women leaders just like you with my courses and my programs. So thank you so much for joining in. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. And Jacqueline, I'm going to give you the last chance if you've got any questions. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. Okay, perfect. You're welcome. All right. No, just right now, you're the only one. You're the last one left. So we've had a couple that were joining in and a couple that have dropped off. So um, sometimes it's a bigger group and sometimes it's a smaller group, and that's a, mhm. Yeah, like a contract, like a worker's contract. Yep. Yeah. Well, that's yeah. So in one hand, that's to the advantage of the company in the sense of like, well, then they can it's all kind of hidden, right? And at the same time, you can also use it to your own advantage because that's a question you can either raise that question of like, all right, like how do we get more insight into the pay, salaries, etc., or just use it for yourself as like, here's you can use it as a more stronger negotiating position and thinking, okay, I've done my market research. When I look at companies of the similar size in the similar region with a similar role, this is the expected salary range that I should be in. And then you can have from that starting point. If they're not willing to provide clarity, then you essentially want to set the rules yourself. No, but there's also the question of, and I will say this each and every time to my clients is like, your worth is not the same as your salary, and you're priceless. No one can pay you what you're worth, but you can look towards the industry in terms of salary, in terms of different compensation structures to determine whether or not, based on the value and the contribution that you make at work with the role, the responsibilities that you have, that you can then match those to a salary range and an expectation. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so that's where you really need to start. That's where you start to advocate, have to advocate for yourself. And at the end of the day, always remember you're not bound to your company. If your company or that organization isn't willing to find a solution that works for both of you, then you have a then for you can be the question of, will I accept this and just accept what the situation is, or am I going to choose and decide to do something different? And one of the things that I have found is that, and I used to have this too, is when it comes to negotiation, there's always a winner and there's a loser. Someone has to give something up and someone else gets something. But realistically, what we really should be looking towards is negotiation should be a win-win. Because if your company is looking at it like, oh, I don't want to pay anymore, this is all that is like, I'm not going to give you the clarity, I'm not going to pay you anymore. you know what, you figure it out and you're like, okay, well, I guess that's it, and you accept it, but you get frustrated and you start to lose your motivation. You start to go like, what am I doing here? I don't feel valued. Then they still lose. Both you lose and the company. Mhm. Right, but then that's where you make a choice. Yeah. So knowing that and knowing what the how that feels now, it's you can't change the past, but you can use it as a learning going forward and realize, okay, so not only is it important the environment and the people that I work with, but it's just as important to have the compensation that matches that. Because over the long term, sometimes we look very short term, but if we're realistic over the long term, when you have a salary, like you've accepted a lower salary, it carries through your entire career almost. So rather than and then there's also the aspect, and this is the research has shown this, women are very loyal, which is on one hand fantastic, but it's not always in our favor. And so when it comes to salary or compensation, one thing that we as women need to get better at is realizing that we can stand up for ourselves, and that it's not greedy, it's not being um like bossy or any of that kind of stuff. It's just we just want to be recognized for the value and the contribution that we make. And if you're there are lots of great places to work. So if it's really not a match, because at times you can, right? There's at times there's going to be, all right, you know what? If it comes down to the last couple thousand, what are we talking about here? I can accept that. But if it becomes a significant over time, if it keeps getting to be a significant wage gap, then it's I guess the way I always look at this is like, when I'm retired, are they going to be the people that are going to come visit me? Probably not. So, even though I love the people that I work with or I have a great environment, I also need to make sure that it's on all sides it's working, and it's not just a good thing because I like the job, but it's also because I'm well compensated, I am valued. And one of the clients I also had this book with this week, she's like, "Well, I just want to be valued. I don't need more salary. I just want to be valued." I said, "So if you're saying that to your boss and he gives you a pat on the head of like, 'Oh, you did a great job,' then for them, they've done their job, and yet for you, you're like, "Yeah, but I actually wanted, like, a hard type of compensation, like actual money and a promotion." But if you're not asking for it, you're not being specific about it, you're not going to get there. So, I would always encourage is, like, look at negotiating for a higher salary, whether you're in a current role or whether you're negotiating into a new role. Look at it as, how do we create a win-win? Because only in a win-win will both the company profit and you profit. Often, yes, oftentimes they are. I will say that even my experience, I have negotiated twice now in within the organizations that I was with in a significant raise. But that's in the first case that I did that, I had accepted a lot lower salary than I should have, because I was in this thing of like, oh, you know what? I guess that's enough. At least it's a job, and maybe I'm not worth anymore, because we make this mistake of thinking, well, whatever they offer me is my actual value. It's a starting. I always think, now it's a starting point. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's it's a very valid point. We talk ourselves down versus and really understanding the actual contribution that we're making. Yeah. Yeah. So I all right. Thank you for your interactive conversation, Jacqueline. I really appreciate that. Just gonna wrap it up here, Jacqueline. I'm gonna be in touch with you in a little bit, but thanks very much for everyone that has joined in on well, I've been on Instagram as well as Facebook. But I appreciate any questions. Send the DM and we can go from there. Have a great weekend, everyone. You're welcome. Bye.